Hi there, my friends. I'm Nate and welcome to my channel. I'm going to start a rather long new series today and actually read all the sections from A Course in Miracles and then stop and explain things. I am a person who has read them. I'm reading it right now for the 14th time, and I have spent hundreds or thousands of hours in the last 6 years listening to different teachers, Nick Sanchez primarily, but other teachers as well, like David Hoffmeister, Robert and Emily Perry, who I've worked with, and really do understand, at least intellectually, the meaning of the Course in Miracles. It's not actually meant to be understood intellectually, or you you might you might find it interesting on an intellectual level, but one thing I can tell you is the actual healing doesn't come from the mind stuff, really. It comes from the felt experience in your heart. And that's what the workbook is for. The workbook is an incremental, bite off a little at a time, because cognitive dissonance, the idea that new ideas coming into a mind that already has a set belief system, those new ideas aren't going to seamlessly come through. So it's very slowly and gently, this is the workbook I'm speaking of, changing your heart, really, so that you actually get into the felt experience of innocence, complete and utter innocence, which means a shared innocence between yourself and the world, and just pure joy and pure peace. And that is what the workbook is for, but it is also helpful for some of us to have a pretty good intellectual grounding in it. And so that's why I'm going to go into this. What I feel is, if any of you have ever heard of the 100th monkey, it's an experiment about how monkeys learn from watching each other, and by the stretch, we do that too. It's called social learning, and as more and more of us actually find our invulnerable peace of mind and demonstrate that, teach it to the world through demonstrating, uh, eventually more and more people are going to be attracted to this, and that is how we ultimately save this world from what it is right now, which doesn't look very promising. But it is promising. The inevitable is love, but that's where we're going to end up after all of the calamity and chaos that we need to go through. But this is also a very apt time to be working on extending love to everybody around you so that we don't need to suffer needlessly for too long. That's how I see it, anyways. So I am going to start this series. I will be reading the text itself and taking breaks, probably frequently, to just explain something. And hopefully that will be helpful in the salvation of the world, which is what I am here to be a part of. That's what I've decided. The first chapter is basically a list of miracle principles, and I'm going to skip that. So the reason I'm going to skip the chapter on miracle principles is because this is the COA version that Robert Perry put together, where he reintroduced a bunch of text into the Course in Miracles that Helen and Bill and Ken Wapnick had taken out. And in one sense, the first chapter on miracle principles, I really think it was appropriate to take out all the stuff that they took out. Mainly because it's too complex to start the book with. Like, I don't even understand some of the miracle principles, although I haven't read them in a while. And um, so we're going to start with chapter 2, and we're also invited by an editor's note to actually skip the first section of chapter 2, but he does recommend that you read a brief description, which is in the first footnote, and then the last three paragraphs. So I will do that before I go into chapter 2, section 1. And chapter 2 is called The Right Defense and Release from Fear. And section 1 of that chapter is called The Real Meaning of Possession. The following is a brief summary of this section. We have an irresistible attraction to God, an innate drive to be possessed by God, i.e., to wholly belong to Him. So I'm going to start right now because many people who happen upon this video will probably be like, no, I don't. And I'm going to explain one thing about psychology, which is, and this is established in the psychology world, anywhere from 95 to 97% of our mind. I'm not going to use the word brain because we're really talking about minds here. And brains actually, they don't have anything to do with minds. Um, but 95 to 97% of our mind is unconscious, which means it is hidden from view, from us, from the person who is having the conscious experience. So when he makes bold statements like that, we have an irresistible attraction to God, an innate drive to be possessed by God. He is speaking about our unconscious mind. In our unconscious mind, we do. It's just, and later sections of this chapter will explain this uh, as it kind of structures, it describes the structure of the mind very well in later chapters. But basically, the reason that this innate drive to be possessed by God is hidden from us is because it's underneath all of this other gunk, which is like stuff from the world that we see that we have rejected or chosen against. We stuff it into the unconscious mind. And then, unfortunately, what the ego does with it is it projects it out onto the screen. So, all the things that we reject in ourselves, we project out onto a screen and see it in the world, which is a great idea, except as I always say, it introduced fear into the world because we put all of those negative traits like evil out there, and now we're afraid of it. But of course, this is all happening in the unconscious mind, so we're not aware of it, and you kind of have to just take my word for it. You're not going to necessarily consciously um, fess up to this, let's say. So we have this irresistible attraction to God. We fear this drive, yet cannot extinguish it. So we distort it into four false versions, four conventional desires for possession. So why do we fear this drive? We fear this drive because we have split minds, and part of our mind is the Holy Spirit, which remembers who we truly are. And then the other part of the mind is called the ego. And the ego, I just define it as a thought system based on a premise that we are separate from each other, that we do not share one mind, that we all have separate agendas, separate purposes, separate truths, and we have splintered apart, and we believe that this took place and that it happened. So the ego, being the part of the mind that thinks that it's separate, has separate agendas from its brothers and sisters, is also the only part of the mind that can experience fear, right? The Holy Spirit knows of our oneness, and it doesn't have any questions about that. It's certain of that. So it doesn't experience anything that we would qualify as a negative emotion. So the reason that the ego fears these impulses to be possessed by God is that it knows it would be annihilated in the process once we were to come into a felt experience of our true oneness with everything in creation, the ego would vanish into thin air. So that is the reason why it's trying to extinguish this irresistible pull to God, is because of its own annihilation. And it is correct. It would be annihilated. That's the whole point of this course, is undoing the ego. But here they are. One is possessing or being possessed by other bodies, as in sexuality. So this would be in the kind of world of S&M, for instance, which actually does transfer into our sexual relationships more than we think. There is a kind of a dominance and a submission. There's a top and a bottom, right, in the LGBTQ world. And some of us prefer being the dominant and the possessor, and some of us prefer being the possessed. Uh, Number two is possessing things, and I think that's probably the biggest one in this world today, as the rich continue to just hoard their wealth in hopes that ultimately that they can find salvation. And then the other, I don't know, 95% of us who aren't rich are imagining someday we will be rich. uh, Three, being possessed by or possessing, controlling the spirit or spirits. So this would be a lot of more acute mental health, people with more acute mental health issues who are feeling like they are possessed by a demon of some sort, like there's something essentially broken in them. Uh, Four is possessing knowledge in the conventional sense of the word. Not being true expressions of the possession drive. The true expression is that we all want to be possessed by God. These do not satisfy it, and they also cause negative symptoms in their own right. Therefore, as each form of possession intensifies, it produces mounting fear. As a false solution to this fear, we try to halt the expression of that form while still hanging on to the desire for it. So we're kind of in conflict with ourselves at this point because we want it and we don't want it. At the same time, we think it's not good for us. And so we've created conflict in our mind. We've done this through the desire of a denial mechanism, which also impairs our ability to operate effectively. The real solution involves realizing that possession, in the conventional sense, does not exist at all on the level of true reality, because in truth, no one can be taken over by anyone or anything else. In reality, we can neither possess nor be possessed, except by God, and we are, and that is eternal, and that is unchangeable. So, what the editors of the COA version recommend is that you read that, and then you just read the last 3 paragraphs of this section, and then you will have what you need to proceed to the next. So, this is paragraph 24. The obvious correction for all types of the possession fallacy is to redefine possession correctly. In the sense of taking over, the concept does not exist at all in divine reality, which is the only level where real existence is a meaningful term. No one can be taken over unless he wills to be. I kind of want to stop and just mention what he said about divine reality. He's speaking of spirit, which is not to be confused with matter. Of course, they are opposites. Matter and spirit are opposites. We live in a world, very materialistic world right now, and that is because it is based on the premise that matter exists. And in here, he is making a clear statement that that does not exist, but that divine reality of eternal spirit does exist, and that is where love resides, and fear resides in the matter world, the material world. And this is actually a point that Donald Hoffman brings to our attention about the Planck scale that scientists have already found as they study the material world, the atoms and the subatomic particles at smaller and smaller measurements with their high energy microscopes because they need a super lot of energy to actually see anything precisely at that infinitesimal size of things. And the Planck scale is basically the limit of how small things can get. 1.34 times 10 to the minus 32 centimeters, which is like 0.00, bunch of more zeros, 134 centimeters. So smaller than the pin, a head of a pin for sure. But still, Donald Hoffman makes the point that beyond that, there is no actual functional reality. They can't get to smaller than that. And that is very significant because that basically means our world is essentially like a computer screen. It's just the Planck scale. You would think about the pixels on your computer, which is also very small. So we get high resolution images now on our computer screens. But all the same, it's not functionally real if it has a limit to how small it can get. So back to divine reality, which is the only level where real existence is a meaningful term. I should start putting my cursors down here so I can see where I left off. No one can be taken over unless he wills to be. However, if he places his mind under tyranny rather than true authority, it says here, see previous reference, and I am going to read the footnotes. This is from one of the miracle principles, miracle principle 43. If it, the mind, does not freely elect to do so, allow spirit to create through it, it retains this creative ability, but places itself under tyrannous rather than authoritative control. Which is saying, this is referencing a lot of stuff, but we can miscreate. Our minds are more powerful than we ever have imagined that they are. Just like Jesus says in the Bible that you could literally move mountains with your mind. That's how powerful your mind is. And because it's a shared mind, that's what makes it so powerful. And we misuse it to basically create strife and conflict and suffering in the world. And that is because we've put it under the tyrannous guidance of the ego thought system. So if anybody is thinking about certain tyrants in the news today, I will just point out that he is an actor performing his role. And if we really want to get through this quicker, we need to just send that guy genuine, pure love. And that would actually fix everything. It would all go away if enough of us were doing that. You know who I'm talking about. I heard him say during the 2024 campaign at one point, all I ever wanted was to be loved. And when we don't get that love, we do turn into a tyrant. But I'm not going to get into politics here. He introduces the concept of submission dominance onto free will himself. This produces the obvious contradiction inherent in any formulation which associates free will with imprisonment. So that's actually referencing yesterday's episode. If you want to listen to my episode on free will and A Course in Miracles, I explain what he's talking about there. Even in very mild forms, this kind of association is risky and may spread quite unexpectedly, particularly under external stress. In other words, by freely willing to be taken over, either by other people or by outside circumstances, we make it appear that free will leads to imprisonment. Yet even in this situation, we can still maintain a degree of personal freedom through internally controlling how much power we give away. We are able to do this, however, only when outer conditions are peaceful. When circumstances become more stressful, our habit of giving away control spreads, and as a result, we seem to be almost entirely at the mercy of outside forces. And this leads to Jesus' question, why should you be at their mercy? So, inside of all of us, there is just this deep truth of God. Because when we first had this idea of separating, it doesn't matter when that happened. The whole idea of history is based on the idea that it keeps happening. But when we first had that idea, which is referred to as the tiny mat idea in the Course, what would it be like to be separate? God introduced his one intervention, and that was by introducing the Holy Spirit, a part of our minds that remembers who we truly are, one undivided son, daughter of God. And that is the truth. Okay? Truth with a capital T, absolute truth. This is truth that doesn't really concern itself with who believes it or not, right? When we're all defending our own personal truths, we get offended when other people don't share our truth. But this truth is just true. It doesn't depend on our believing in it to be true, okay? Anything that would be called a law of God goes into that category. And basically anything that it belongs to that category is going to be capitalized in the text in A Course in Miracles so that you know that you're talking about something true, or as something, he said, something that exists in divine reality. Okay, so I need to explain this last sentence. You are thinking that people can possess you if you believe that their thoughts or the external environment can affect you, regardless of what they think. So it's essentially conforming to the ego thought system because you need to get along with people. Uh, that's what he's talking about there. There is this quiet, still voice in you that knows that you are just eternally safe and one with your brothers and sisters, and that your shared innocence extends everywhere in all directions. And yet, the ego, being the tyrant that it is, uh, keeps insisting to us that we conform to this other idea that we're all separate and we all have separate truths. And I think that irresistible pull that we feel towards God is wanting to get out from that imprisonment. And that's what I was talking about yesterday is, in the free will, is there's a part of us that knows we are imprisoning ourselves and wants to get release from it, wants to get free of all the regulations and the rules in this world that are all based on just fear and protection of the individual body. Uh, that's the irresistible pull, is to escape from that. And we keep telling ourselves it's the world out there that won't let us escape from that. And we have to change our minds about that if we want to gain the locus of control to free ourselves. So free our minds. It's all in our head in the first place. The whole world that we see is a construction of our own minds. It's not actually out there. That's the big trick. That's the big conspiracy. And yet, unlike in the Matrix, I am the lead conspirator in the conspiracy against my happiness, my salvation. That's what we have to take responsibility for. This is a book that not only corrects the Bible many, many times, but also corrects the schools of psychology. He has conversations with Freud later on that some of you might find really interesting, and talks about other psychologists as well, mostly here in chapter 2 and chapter 3. And so, yes, our suffering is self imposed. And we can free ourselves from suffering if we stop telling ourselves, the world won't let me. Because the world out there is a projection of my own imprisoned mind. I hope that makes sense. Paragraph 26. You are perfectly unaffected by all expressions of lack of love. These can be either from yourself and others, or from yourself to others, or from others to you. So, in the divine reality, which is like a dimensionless space, it's very hard to imagine because we think about space and time and matter. And this is not like that. This is the dimensionless space that we would call heaven, where we exist now and for eternity. It's not someplace we go after we die. It's someplace we are right now, having a dream of what it would be like to be separate. Peace is an attribute in you. You cannot find it outside. All mental illness is some form of external searching. Mental health is inner peace. It enables you to remain unshaken by lack of love from without, and capable, through your own miracles, of correcting the external conditions which proceed from lack of love in others. Okay, so really, it's putting the responsibility on each of us to heal ourselves. Uh, where, and I'm guilty of this too, waiting for something in the world to happen to bring on the healing. Uh, there's so much about taking accountability in A Course in Miracles for your own suffering, whatever form it takes. And to me, that has always, as a therapist, just been so logical that if you put the cause of your suffering out there in the world, and we have already established from yesterday's, or from 2 days ago when I dropped an episode on free will, that all those other figures in the world, they have free will too. So you can't really decide for them what they're going to do. So if you're putting your salvation or your happiness, which is what you want, truly, the peace and your joy, out there, as like you need to find it out there, or people need to stop being jerks out there so that I can find it, you are you are disempowering yourself from true healing. Okay, so this is a book about psychology, and the first step is own it, that you're responsible for your own healing. I am responsible for my own healing. Once we find the healing, we typically want to extend it to others and share it with others. Uh, and that's just a natural thing if you're, well, the old saying, only hurt people hurt people. Once you find your own inner peace, your own inner joy, that motivation to hurt others, that just flitters away. So if you're finding this helpful, I would appreciate it if you would like and subscribe to this channel, and hype it too. There's that little bell. I think it's in the upper right corner of the video where you can hit it and hype it, so that this message can get out to more people. And I'm going to be with you for the long haul here. This is a very long book, and I will probably take interludes at times. If anybody has like questions that they bring up in the comments that they would like me to talk about, I can always do that. Uh, So leave comments and questions and sharing what your experience has been with the Course. It sounds like some of the people who are watching are already Course in Miracles students from recent comments, which I'm very happy to find out about. All right, so have a wonderful day, everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.